I was in a sales pitch a couple of years ago, and the guy's like, look, I'm pretty sophisticated. I look at 315 KPIs every single day. And the reality is, if you're looking at 315 KPIs every single day, you're looking at nothing.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Your Customer, Your Success. My guest today is Jon Morris. Jon is the founder and CEO of Fiscal Advocate, where they help businesses use their financial data to grow faster and more profitably. Jon started out by building Rise Interactive from a $10,000 business plan competition win into one of the largest independent digital agencies in the U.S., scaling it to nearly $40 million before successfully exiting. What I like about Jon's perspective is that he doesn't just talk about growth. He talks about profitable growth. He's known for what he calls being awesome at boring. And he's put all that together now, and he works with founders, agencies, and professional service firms as a fractional CFO and advisor, helping leadership teams focus on the few metrics that actually matter. We're going to talk about them, and build businesses that are sustainable, not just bigger. Jon, welcome to the show.
Gary, so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. I love the story. I'm sure this is what most people ask you to start with, but I got to ask you more about how you took $10,000. Was it a business school competition?
I went to University of Chicago for business school, entered their annual business plan competition, took second place, won $10,000, and that was my seed money to start Rise.
And second place was $10,000. That's not bad.
Well, no, actually, it's horrible, and I'll tell you why.
Really? Why?
So I became a judge. I became a mentor for the competition, and I think second place today is like $250,000. And when I was in the deliberation room, they're talking about what they're going to give like the top 10. They're like, well, we got to give them something. Why don't we just give them like 20 grand or something? So they have so much more money now that the giveaway money was like my prize money.
Well, amazing. That is amazing. And so tell us about scaling it. It worked. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the drivers of growth and the KPIs, but what do you think worked? I guess, tell us a little bit more about what was successful, especially starting up. Like what do you think was the key to your success there?
So I'm going to tell you a few things. The first thing is, when you go to business school, they actually talk about how, you go raise money from venture capitalists or private equity and you build it up for a few years and then you exit it. And I give a very different recommendation. I recommend a very long-term view where you build a great company. I have 20-year time horizon type views of what I build something. I'm 6 years into this company. I was 16 years into that company. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I was incredibly lucky or strategic, I don't know which one, in terms of the industry I chose to be in. And, you can't fight the wind. If you're in an industry that is a dying industry, I don't care how smart you are, you're gonna become a casualty. Mm-hmm. I was in a space where there was massive amounts of traditional linear TV media, so people buying TV commercials, and that money was all moving over to digital. And so I happened to be in the right place at the right time because I created a digital agency where they were catching wind. I also was, everyone talks about how they're data-driven today. We are truly one of the most data-driven agencies at that moment in time relative to the other competition. So I had this long-term view. I focus on building a great company. I want to make sure that whatever I sell, the experience is better than what I sold. Doesn't always happen, but it's, from a philosophical standpoint, I'm constantly focusing on how do I really deliver something amazing. And so I'd say a few of those things kind of led to the success.
That's amazing. That's a great story. And I love that you threw the experience in there. We'll get to that. Yeah. We'll get to that shortly. But yeah, the timing is essential sometimes. There's only so much you can do. So talk a little bit, you said one thing that really threw me off my next question, but you talked about the experience has to be better than you expect. Yeah. And so you're a CFO. You don't expect to hear that from a CFO because you expect to hear financial stuff, which I'm sure you're awesome at and you're very analytical. But I love that you threw in the experience must be better than that. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. So I'll put the CFO hat on for a second.
Yeah.
One of the most important metrics is your client churn. You spend all this time and money to go win a customer. Wouldn't it be amazing if you held on to that customer for decades? And so in order to do that, I still want you to deliver profitably, but I want to make sure that what you deliver is special and unique and that your clients know that you care about them and that you have their back. And so if you want to make sure that you don't have to keep on spending money to go win new customers because you keep on losing customers, you want to build something great. I just think there's something prideful about, selling something that you believe is of real value to the customer. I'm sure you've heard this expression, this person is so good at selling, they could sell ice to an Eskimo.
Right.
I actually don't think that that's a good salesperson. I think that's a good con man.
Mm-hmm.
A good salesperson actually listens and actually cares for the person they're trying to help and wants to give them a solution that's going to solve their problem. And so if you are a good salesperson, ideally you have a good product to sell. And so I think it's really important that the promise maker actually delivers something to the promise keeper, and the promise keeper can make that experience better. I will tell you, as a CFO, there are 4 things I care about in terms of your annual plan. The first is you need a revenue goal. The second is you need a profit goal. The third is you need a cash goal. And the fourth thing you need is you need to invest in your business so that next year you can have a better revenue, profit, and cash goal. And so if you're not investing in that service, then you're going to have a hard time sustaining and creating growth within your organization.
And there's a lot there. The first thing I love is that, I've had clients that I've been with for almost 20 years, like you said. And I say this all the time on the show. I've had a client I can think of, wonderful people, wonderful client, that when I started, they were $5 billion in assets. And when I left, they were, 17, 18 billion, right?
Yeah.
And guess what? We weren't doing selling all the time, right? You're building a relationship and delivering on your promises that you kept, and hopefully delivering more. And now in all those years, you're going to have some ups and downs. But if you build that trust and you build that relationship, then you have a referenceable client that grows with you for many years. And one of the things I do reinforce in the show is just that, right? If you're the proverbial leaky bucket, you're leaking clients, you're going to have, you're going to be spending more time going out there, getting sales, and you're going to put people in that position of maybe, pushing the sales rather than building the relationships and providing solutions. So that's what we preach on this show. So that is very refreshing to hear you say that, and reassuring as well. Let's get back to the KPIs, because we talked that you threw a couple of metrics out there, but you also say there's only 3 KPIs business owners should truly focus on. So what are they? And let's talk about what are they first.
Okay. Year-over-year revenue growth,
mm-hmm.
profit margin, and cash relative to monthly overhead. And I'll go through all 3 real quickly.
Yeah.
First of all, as the CEO of a company, and there's different goals you have as CEO, but generally, I think a CEO is in charge of spending its time and money for the business as intelligently and as effectively as possible. And the greatest way you can measure that is this company growing? If you've been the CEO for a business for multiple years and your revenue is flat and you're not making movement, you really have to consider, are you doing the right thing as the leader of that company? The second one is profit margin. If you have revenue growth, but your profits are staying the same or shrinking, first of all, your business, most businesses, unless you're in the software space, is valued based on your profit. So if you think about one day you want to sell and have a big exit, there is the profit that you have, and then there's the multiple that you can obtain. And revenue growth is the number one driver for getting that multiple expansion. And profit is the amount that you're going to be multiplying that by. So those are the first 2. And then the third one, and this is honestly the most neglected one. And it's funny because you always hear cash is king. But the amount of cash that companies, when they come to me, have on hand is rarely enough.
Really?
And there's two things that I want you to think about. The first one is your rainy day fund. The next time a COVID happens, or there's a massive recession, can you weather the storm? Do you have enough cash reserves to put you in a safe spot? The second one I want you to think about is opportunity. Microsoft bought LinkedIn for $28.6 billion in an all-cash deal. Think about that. They had tens of billions of dollars in cash that they could utilize to go buy companies. And so if you have a lot of cash, when opportunities present itself, you can actually implement and do something. I can't tell you how many phone calls I received where someone's like, I just had this amazing opportunity, but I don't have any cash. Like, do you have any ideas of how I could go buy that company?
Mm-hmm.
And my answer is typically no. That you can start changing your behaviors to build up your cash so that the next opportunity you can take advantage of it.
So that's interesting because that's actually a great personal wealth strategy too. I think people, the same thing, are always struggling with cash and cash on hand.
Yeah.
And it actually, I think about that all the time. I'm kind of big on cash myself, and a lot of advice. Well, you don't want too much cash; it's a drag.
Yeah.
And even in portfolio management, same thing. Cash is a drag, but it really does give you that flexibility. And I look, for me, peace of mind as well. And that's more personal than on the corporate
Yeah.
level. But I think at the same thing, you're basically saying the same thing on the corporate level. If there's a heavens forbid a COVID or recession, et cetera, you can face those tailwinds with a little bit of confidence that you can pay the bills and keep the lights on.
And I'm not saying that you can't use that cash and have it just sit in your bank account, that you can't invest in anything.
Yes, of course.
But what I am saying is, don't go invest in something that's illiquid. Don't go invest in something that is beyond risky that, could completely implode. The idea is that yes, you want your money to make money for you, but you want this cash available to invest in your business because you believe that, you can control those investments and get a greater return than investing in the stock market.
Right. And there's plenty of investment firms that would like to help you with that if you have cash in hand with those strategies. So where do you, given that, what you just explained marvelously, where do you feel most leaders miss the boat on this, and why?
So I think a couple of things. I think one, they forget who their boss is. Their boss is the income statement. And what I love about the income statement being your boss is it is the most objective boss you can possibly have. The second thing is, I've spent a lot of times thinking about the KPIs that matter. But the reality is there's plenty of other KPIs. Like if you just take revenue, there are 3 numbers that drive your revenue: renewals, upsells, and new business. If you take new business, there are 4 numbers that drive your new business: your number of at-bats, your win rate, your average order value, and the average sales cycle. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to simplify business, how to reduce it to the least amount of numbers that matter. But most people don't spend their time thinking about that. I was in a sales pitch a couple of years ago, and the guy's like, look, I'm pretty sophisticated. I look at 315 KPIs every single day. And the reality is, if you're looking at 315 KPIs every single day, you're looking at nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want people to simplify their business, to understand the numbers that matter. Challenge me. If you can come up with 2 numbers, try to come up with 2. But the more that you add, the more complexity you add, and the harder it is to actually optimize to those numbers.
And this is so great because we just had a guest a few weeks ago talk about he worked in a contact center environment, and he had the same issue. Too many. What's with the 42 KPIs?
Yeah.
And I'm literally quoting him. Why 40? He boiled it down to basically 3, but then he put it into one number, that you can compare contact centers all over the world and see who's doing better than who.
So,
and go ahead. Yeah.
In my software, we came up with something called the CPR score. And the CPR score is a play on health, but it's an acronym for cash, profit margin, and revenue growth. And so we did the same thing. We got it down to one number.
Oh, really? You did? Yeah.
Into our software. I want you to be at a 60 or higher. So in a professional service company, 20% year over year revenue growth, 20% profit margin, and 2.5 times your monthly overhead is the amount of cash I want you to have. And so if you're you get basically 20 points for each three of those things, but then the dials change based on how your actual growth is and your actual profit margin and your actual cash.
Interesting. So you did, yeah. So I saw that. I was, researching before the show. I saw that on the website. I'm going, I wonder if that's the same thing. So it is. That's really interesting. And so when you present this to folks, what do you get? Oh, this is great. You're just what I need. Or is a tendency to kind of push back and say, no, I love my 315 KPIs. It's because I'm just thinking it depending on the personality of it's a control thing, right? Almost like it makes them feel good. So I'm kind of getting at what really motivates them to hold on to 800 KPIs that don't particularly matter.
I think, first of all, you have to be of the mindset that A, you want to simplify your business, but also B, you want to be sophisticated. And, I've been doing this fractional CFO role for about 6 years. What I found a lot of my job is cost control. And what cost control means is that you're overspending on stuff and you have to cut expenses. I've also learned that there is a whole bunch of people that really don't enjoy that conversation.
Yeah.
And so you have to balance, are you willing to make the tough decisions? I promise you, I can simplify your business and I can help you make the right decision. You just got to be willing to make the right decision. And that's not easy. Going back to the income statement being your boss, if you want a good report card, you'll make these decisions. But sometimes you're willing to take the emotional aspects and have more control versus the business aspects.
And so, right. So we're talking to get the emotion out of it and get the logic going.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting concept. Well, a lot of what we talk about on the show in CX and customer experience has to do with the emotion and empathy and hitting on the emotions, and customers call they're upset, they're emotional. But what you're talking about, you really do have to go for that logic part of the brain and use kind of the analysis and simplify it rather than use analysis to show how fancy you are and how brilliant you are.
Do you ever see, I forget the name of them, but like they're the shows where like the bar is like being poorly managed and they bring in the expert and he helps them turn the bar around, or the restaurant is being poorly managed.
Restaurant Impossible, one of my favorite shows ever. Robert Irvine, I always say this, but I don't want to interrupt you. What are you going to go? One of the best CX leaders you'll ever find. Because I'll tell you about that in a second. But go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
Okay, no, but so one of the things he always does is he shows them like the plate of food and the amount of ingredients that are in it and how the person's like way overspending. And, my job is actually very similar. What I'm showing people is, you mentioned CX, you only get 50% of the revenue to deliver for your customers. And if you're spending more than that, you're inefficient in your delivery. You're adding more ingredients to the sandwich than you need to add. And so I spend time teaching people that. Then the problem in my industry is that my clients, 80% of their cost are people. And they're people they love and they care about and they've been in the trenches with. And, if the revenue is not there, you have to adjust those people. And, whether it's across the board pay cuts or reducing bonuses or reducing the size of the team, those are the complexities. Those are the emotional aspects that I talk about. It is much easier in Restaurant Possible to be like, okay, I'm only going to do a quarter pound or quarter pound of meat versus half a pound of meat.
Yeah. It is fascinating though, but it's the same concept because the menus sometimes you go into these restaurants and they're huge, but that plays into the cost thing. All kidding aside, because you have to keep the inventory and most of it's crap, which means everything's frozen, which turns into a bad product, but also a bad experience. But I can go on for Restaurant Impossible forever. So he's just absolutely fascinating. So let's try to tie this into what we talk about on this show a little bit more, the customer experience. We've talked about focusing on the wrong metrics, but let's talk about how that kind of plays into damaging the trust with customers and employees and damaging that experience in the way I just said, right? The menu's too big, which means you have too
Yeah.
much inventory, which means you have to have frozen crap,
Yeah.
which means your food sucks, which means people are unhappy, but you think you're a genius and you wonder why everybody's not in your restaurant.
So, first thing, very similar to the restaurant, how many services do you offer? If you go look, the great thing about LinkedIn is you can go see basically any business's org structure. And you can generally find out what they're great at just by looking at how many people do one particular job. So, if you take a traditional marketing agency, and let's just say there's 100 people, and 80 of them are in the creative group, and 3 of them are in the media group, they're probably not as strong in media relative to creative. And what you find is that they widen their services out. And so they're now starting to go a mile wide and an inch deep.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows them to not be great at anything. And so if you really, as you talk about the experience, and I talk about it as the promise maker and the promise keeper, the promise keeper needs to sell something awesome. And what I tell you is that is a never ending journey. So as if you remember, I said you have a revenue goal, a profit goal, a cash goal, and an investment goal. And I said the idea is the investment goal is what investments do you make so that your business is better at the end of the year. So next year you have even better revenue, profit, and cash. Sometimes those investments are non-client related, but as we're talking about the experience, I want you to think about, well, what investments are you making? Do you have a good client onboarding process? Do you have a good client offboarding process? Is there a specific service that you're providing that is lackluster, but you still it's still core to your business? What can you do to make it better? I just had a client who hired me to help them. I'm a weird CFO because I have a lot of advisory and just general coaching services, not just fractional CFO, where I'm helping company with their web development process and developing the SOP. And we're getting very granular in terms of, okay, a client signs the contract. What is the standard welcome email that is sent? And what's in that welcome email? And how do you manage getting the billing information? And then how do you make sure that the invoicing doesn't erode the experience? Because you'd be amazed at just, people don't like being double charged or charged the wrong amount or for the wrong services. And so when you get into these little details, those are the things that can build an amazing experience. And so, but that's an investment they're making to make it so that by the end of this year, their web development service will be better than it was at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm. You've hit on a whole bunch of things there, but one thing I got to pull out of that, and I say this all the time, I've said it, I've talked about this a long time. No one cares about offboarding. And I do. I'm saying you should. Yeah. You're absolutely right. But how many other podcasts are all wonderful, but everybody talks about onboarding, onboarding, and no one wants to talk about it because who wants to say I'm losing a client? No one wants to be good at losing a client. Well, you're offboarding for a number of reasons, right? Because there could be you're losing a client. There's basically 3 reasons. It's some sort of corporate action, a merger or acquisition, where they're taking their business elsewhere. You lost your contact, your champion. They went somewhere else. There's somebody new who wants his own provider, or it is service related. You're not doing a good enough job. Or whatever, something related in there with price or something like that at a competitor. And so when you offboard them, I've been taught this from a fairly early age that the split second a client ceases to be a client, they become a prospect again, and they should be treated as such. And so you really should give great care in that offboarding process because fine, be professional, move them along, do what you have to do to move them to a new provider. And when they fall flat on their face, then they can come back and say, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
But it's, you do not want to ignore offboarding. I've seen that too many times while they're leaving. Forget about it.
Yeah.
So that was a great one and something, and that's just an insight that most people miss. So good for you. All right. So let's talk about getting help with all this stuff because, you're not doing this for your company. You're advising other companies. And I'd assume some folks are a little hesitant to reach out and say, hey, I need help with this stuff. And that's where you come in. But why do you think? I mean, I'd assume you've probably come into these situations where they've waited a little bit too long, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
thank God he's here now. And so, why do you think they wait too long, or what kind of holds them back with seeking outside counsel like yourself?
I think there's a number of reasons. I've had two clients of mine where they had someone internal that was managing their finances who was not doing a good job.
Mm.
And one of them, they came a client of mine a few months ago. They talked to me about a year and a half ago, and they gave trust to the person who wasn't doing a good job, and they actually put them in a really, really bad position. So now we have to take them out of that. So that's one reason I see. Second one is it might feel overwhelming. In order for us to do our job, there's a lot of data management, which feels overwhelming, but the overall savings is massive. And so it's getting over that hurdle that you're going to do something that feels overwhelming. Sometimes it's just, embarrassment. You don't want to admit that your finances are in bad position.
Yeah.
And, it takes a lot to say, I need help. I have two different types of clients. The first one are the cash distressed companies. Those are the ones where they're more emotional doing it. The second one is companies that hit a plateau. So they're looking to grow and they just don't know
Yep.
why.
Why they're stuck? Yeah.
And what I can tell you is it seems weird to say, but the income statement tells a story. And if I can organize the income statement in the way that I want to read it, I can tell you exactly why they're not growing almost instantaneously. And, I'll give you a real good example. I have a client of mine that has been on a multi-year basis shrinking. And when you look first at their gross margin, so going back to how much money do they have left over after servicing their customers, it was at way too low of a percentage. So it was in the 30%. If you're below 40%, you're most likely losing money in your gross margin. So that was the first uncovering. So then from there, we got that fixed, but then they had a churn problem. And when you started analyzing the service, they just weren't evolving. They weren't investing in making their service better. So I think at one point, they had a great service relative to the marketplace, but the marketplace evolved and they didn't evolve. Yeah. So we started recommending investing and improving the service offering. And now their retention is starting to improve. Then they were underfunding because they had such a low margin, their sales and marketing. So they didn't have enough money to go win new business. So now we've funded that properly. And now we're working on, well, okay, we funded properly. Are we spending in the right area? Are we getting the right returns off of those investments? And so you can start seeing the things that are in place. And I think this is the year that they're going to turn around and go back on a growth trajectory. But it took a few years to fix these problems to get them to where they needed to be.
And yeah, so that is absolutely fascinating to me. And I think sometimes it's just embarrassment, right? You're not, they're just, shoot, this isn't working. And you don't want to kind of admit that you don't have control over your own company and what you want to do with it. So that is super interesting. I got to keep it moving because this is great stuff because it's so interesting on how you're hitting on similar concepts that people talk about on the show, but it's a much different conversation that we've had recently, certainly when it comes to CX, but you're hitting on a lot of the same stuff. But I've got to ask you this, got a couple more on the traditional interview segment. You said you're awesome at boring, which is something like as a podcast host, you don't really ever want to hear. But I think you're not boring, but you are awesome at boring. I think I know what you mean. What does that actually mean? And what does that look like in your day to day?
In almost anything that you want to do, if you want it to be great at something, there is massive amounts of boring that you have to do. Okay. If you think about sales, so much of sales is just following up with people and sending out, one pagers and calling people regularly, putting proposals together. There's the minutia. I was giving you the example of the web development company where what's the welcome email look like? Where do you save the contract? All this minutia
Yeah.
is boring.
That's,
But as
yep.
you talk about building an amazing experience, those are the things that allow you to build an amazing experience. I'll just use sports as a good example. I played soccer in college, and I spent a lot of time coaching youth people in soccer. If you want to play at the highest level, and I guarantee you this is for any sport, a lot of it is you being on your own, doing the same repetitive task over and over and over again until you get to perfection.
Mhm.
So if you want to achieve success, you got to be awesome at boring.
That's awesome. That is really great. Now I'm a golf nut, so I practice. I take lessons.
Yeah.
You have to talk about repetition. It's just I love practicing. It's kind of cathartic, but you really have to just do the boring chipping, putting, the whole thing. Um, but from a business standpoint, that is a lot of asset servicing. People don't realize that. They think investment management.
No.
There is fancy schmancy stuff that people get excited about, picking stocks and all this, but there's so much boring stuff that goes into it.
Yeah.
And especially on the asset servicing level, it's getting the accounting statements done on time,
Yeah.
the billing, like you said, and tax reclaims, proxies, all the corporate action processing.
Reading 10Ks is not fun.
No, and neither is filling out manual tax forms
Yeah.
for global markets, because think about how much fun it is to fill out your taxes.
Yeah.
Nobody says, "Hey, I can't wait to fill out my taxes," and it's the same thing, but you have to do it, right? And so there's an argument we've talked about on the show a few times, but a lot of CX folks are saying, "Oh, you have to deliver super experiences and make people super fans and all that stuff." And I say sometimes no, you just need that. You need appropriate experiences, because
Yeah.
you have to be. I like the way you said it. I might have. I'll try to quote you when I use it now.
Yeah.
You have to be awesome at boring with
Yeah.
a lot of stuff, and not just everything can't be a super wow experience like you're going to um a concert or something like
Yeah.
that. You're not, we talked about, it's not a Taylor Swift concert. Everybody can't be yelling and screaming. It's not,
Yeah.
it's, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan all the time. Sometimes it's boring, and you got to be good at that stuff. Awesome. So that's a great one. All right. We have time for one more in the traditional interview
Yeah.
part of the show, and then we'll hit the segments. I love what you said about don't worry about the exit yet, because you want to build a long term sustainable business. But I do want to talk about, I want to exit on exits.
Yeah.
So tell us about exiting a business. How did you decide to sell Rise, and what do founders need to know about exiting businesses?
Okay. So a couple things. One, my original exit strategy was I was going to die one day. So that was my exit strategy. That was before I got married. I had kids, and all of a sudden, all my wealth was tied up into one asset, and it's an illiquid asset. And so I wanted to diversify. So that was part of the impetus. I made the decision in October of 2019, and there were 3 reasons why. Reason number 1 was the diversification I just told you. Reason number 2 is my favorite business day of the year is the first business day of the year. I call it game day. And I spend a lot of time preparing for game day to have an amazing year. And in 2019, I had a great plan for 2020. The only problem was it was the same plan as 2019. And I just wasn't excited. Like, I wasn't waking up being like, I can't wait to implement this plan. And what I didn't talk about this, but there's 4 stages of a CEO. And I hit the 3rd stage, which is the most mature CEO. And what that means is I have amazing leaders in every single component of my business, and none of them wanted me meddling in their work. So I really became a strategic CEO. And what I learned is I'm pretty bored being a strategic CEO. I like more the startup growth stage where I'm in the trenches and I'm building and designing things, as opposed to having other people build and design things. And then the third one is there was just some personal reasons where, one of my family members I really think needed more of my help and support, and I wanted to be around for that person. And so those were the 3 reasons. So in terms of exiting, couple things. One, if you can sell and you can make a good amount of money, You can always potentially sell for more, but there's nothing wrong with cashing in your chips. A lot of times people wait too long. And if you think about like climbing up a hill and then going over the hill, I'd rather you sell here as opposed to here when you're on your way down. So that'll be the other aspect I would say in terms of exiting. And then I would say it's, for me, it was incredibly stressful and anxiety ridden up until the day I stepped down as CEO. So from October to April, I was a mess. And then April, I'm like, oh, this is actually great.
That is something that is wonderful advice, wonderful words of wisdom. This has been a great interview segment, but we need to hit the segments. Wish we could spend more time talking to you. Let's hit the segments.
Yep.
All right, it is time for Does It Hold Water, my favorite segment. This is where I ask our guest to be our resident expert witness for the day. I read a piece of thought leadership, a quote from someone, and they are going to decide if the defense case holds water or not. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. This one, the defense is talking about burnout today, John. And the defense attorney says it's actually a quote from Christina Maslach, if I'm saying that correctly. Dr. Christina Maslach, let me give her full credit. She says burnout is a response to chronic job stressors that have not been successfully managed in the workplace. It's an organizational, it's an organizational issue, not a personal one.
I would say it absolutely holds water. I'm actually about to be launching a resource planning tool. And one of the things that I try to identify is the people that you have to be concerned about in terms of burnout. And there's two things that I find that can happen with burnout. The first one is just sheer number of hours. Like, hey, this person's working 90 hours a week. But what I also talk about is contact switching. And if you're in an organization where, you have an account person on 30 different clients and they're getting pinged in every single direction from every single client, it's exhausting. And so you might work less hours, but it burns you out. And that's an organizational structure, not a individual structure.
It's very true. And I'm raising my hand and laughing because I've lived it and my colleagues have lived it, right? And so you can only have so many clients. Now, the number of clients isn't as important as how involved they are, but that's exactly it. The bigger the organization and the worse job that they do with managing the organization and how you're managing your experience for your clients, the harder it gets because you feel like you've lost control. Yep. And I've experienced that with my colleagues, and I just call it the chaos. And for me, my personality type, I'm an SC. I'm kind of a green-blue person.
Yeah.
Chaos is my enemy. I want things organized, I want things under control, and be able to react accordingly. And you get that chaos, and that is exactly it. That tends to burn you out more than anything. Than just if you're working 50, 60 hours and you're having a good time, everybody's doing great, and your clients are happy, and you're growing the business, and you're bringing in new business, and everybody loves it. That's a hell of a lot better than 40 hours of sheer chaos. Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting one for you.
I agree.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Let's hit chip shots. Okay, everybody. It is time for chip shots. These are my shorter form questions, still professional, but a little bit more personal questions. So we go to 3 or 4, time permitting. And John, we always ask the book questions to start off. So we ask for one book that has significantly influenced you in a professional or personal manner, and why?
I'm going to answer this in 2 different ways. So the first thing is it's not a book, but it's an approach to reading. And what I recommend is theme-based reading. And so if you want to get great at customer experience, go read 5 books in a row on customer experience. And you will, by the way, talk about being awesome at boring. Your 5th book will be about 85 to 90% overlap to the other 3 or 4 books that you read. But you will become a fairly solid expert within that area. 2 books that I really enjoyed. One is called Product-Led Onboarding. I don't know the name of the author. I feel awful about that. And the second one is Checklist Manifesto. And I also don't know the author of that book. But Checklist Manifesto is literally about building checklists, but it is incredibly powerful that if you get good at building those checklists, you can build an amazing customer experience. You can build an amazing service offering. And product-led onboarding is, focused really on SaaS, but I think it applies to every industry of
Yeah.
what do you do? So there's something called the moment the value is realized and the moment the value is actualized. And how do you get to those things as fast as possible?
That's interesting stuff. All right. So sorry. What I thought was so interesting about that is I kind of done the same thing through podcasting. Now I agree
Yeah.
with you in a reading perspective, but if you listen to a bunch of different CX podcasts, that's kind of how I started learning, right? About
Yeah.
this business, because I didn't have any formal training. I went and I sought out the training after I started listening to CX podcasts, and there is overlap, but everybody does
Yeah.
it a little different. So that's a great idea and great advice. But we will make use of the editing tool. I will put those authors' names on the video underneath when I
Okay.
edit, and then we'll put them in the show notes. That's what they're for. All right. Great job. All right. So the leader question. Oh, gosh. Now that I've talked to you for 40 minutes, this is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah.
If you could spend a day shadowing a current leader in any profession, who would it be and what would you hope to learn?
So by the way, going back to theme-based reading, I focused on 20th and 21st century leaders, and I read Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, a whole series of leaders. Satya Nadella would be the leader of Microsoft. I really think of him as innovative and also very empathetic. And I think it would be phenomenal to shadow him.
Really? Yeah. Interesting. Empathy is a topic we talk about a lot here. Now, I don't know much about him. And a couple people have mentioned him. So it's probably somebody I have to research. But very interesting. And we had an Elon Musk the other day as well. And that's somebody that's certainly fascinating and is all over the place. Talk about burnout. And how he does a burnout, I don't know. But
It's he is a machine. Like it is
it's crazy.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. All right. We've talked about your success, quite the success to start your career, but is there a particular experience or failure early in your career that's taught you a valuable lesson that you still use today?
Yes. When I graduated college, I was not able to get a job, and I started my first digital marketing agency in 1996, 2 days after I graduated, and grew it for about 5 years, and then became a .com casualty. So I ended up
Oh,
closing the agency down. For the longest period of time, I blamed the .com casualty, and I did not look inward.
mm,
Rise would never have been successful if it wasn't for net traffic, my first agency. What I learned was financial discipline was flawed, and I learned that that my HR practices, such as being scared to let people go, was flawed. And so when I started Rise, I recognized and I finally did a deep dive of what I could learn from those mistakes. And this is what I would just tell people in general about failure. Failure is amazing opportunities to innovate. I feel like we have a really good service, and we lost a deal this week to another company. I have no idea who it was. I very rarely lose deals to a competitor. And, I was told that they had some technology that, streamlined a lot of their processes. So I called a meeting immediately with my team to discuss, what could we have done differently? Or even more importantly, what do we need to do to evolve our service offering so that we are more competitive down the road the next time we're in a pitch? And so it's constantly understanding, learning, and growing so that you can get your sales process better, you can get your service offering better. And so I consider failure a moment in time for deep reflection and action to get better from it.
awesome. Great. And there's John's origin story. He did start a
Yeah.
business. It did fail. And as many did. And certainly that era. Oh my gosh. So
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is great. We got one more. All right.
Yeah.
One question. I like this. This is a newer one. I like this one. And
Yeah.
this could be interesting for you. What is one question you always ask customers or clients that never fails to reveal something new?
So I don't know if my answer is going to be as great for this one as the other ones. But what I would just say, it goes back to my comment of, a great salesperson is really focusing on what their true pain is and what a solution is, and that you care about that solution. And so
Mm.
it's probably a series of questions, but it is all probing to find out, why are they really talking to you? What are they trying to solve? And because if you figure that out, it doesn't matter what you sell. You can figure out, can you help them or can you not help them?
Hmm. Yeah. So you're trying to find their pain, basically.
Yeah, basically find their pain.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Jon Morris, absolutely
Uh-huh.
fabulous guest. So fascinating. Thank you so much for being here. Before we go, why don't you let everybody know where we can find you?
Absolutely. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post every week. You can go to fiscaladvocate.com. We have a great resource section. And you can email me at jon@fiscaladvocate.com.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you for being here. And thank you all for watching Your Customer Success. And again, if you're listening on audio, don't forget there's a video on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget there's the audio on all major platforms. That's all for today. I will be back with more CX leaders. I've got some great customer success leaders lined up. And like I said, a few tricks up my sleeve as well. All right. That's all for today. Thanks for joining. Bye for now. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you found something insightful that will enhance your experiences and drive your success. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and share your thoughts to help us improve the show. Don't forget to head on over to marracxhub.com for more ways to connect with me and learn more about experience management. Until next time, I'm Gary Marra, working hard for your customer and your success.